Zillow just told 221 million people that home prices are going up 2% this year. But here's what they didn't put in the headline. This is Zillow's own forecast over the past 12 months. Same prediction, revised over and over. January, plus 2.6%. By April, they'd slashed it to negative 1.7%. The most visited real estate website in America was telling you home prices were going to fall. Then they reversed. By October, back up to 1.9. November, down to 1.5. December, back up to 2. 7 revisions in 1 year. And when you understand why they keep landing on a positive number, which has everything to do with how Zillow makes $1.7 billion a year, you'll never look at their forecast the same way again. But forget Zillow for a second, because here's what the plus 2% headline is actually hiding. The country underneath that number is splitting in half. 24 of the 50 largest metros declined last year. Some of the hottest markets from 2 years ago are now posting double-digit losses, and homeowners in those markets have lost more equity than most Americans earn in a decade. We're going to name every one of them and show you the exact numbers. And there's one stat that came out in November, one number that we think explains where all of this is heading better than any forecast. It's not a price number, it's not a rate number, and almost nobody is connecting it to what's happening right now. So whether you're a homeowner trying to figure out if your equity is safe, a buyer trying to decide if this is finally your window, or a seller wondering why your open house was empty, let's get into it. All right, let's start with the map, because we can sit here and talk about national averages all day, but that's not what's affecting your life. What's affecting your life is what's happening in your zip code. And when you look at the actual metro level data, the picture is completely different from what the plus 2% headline suggests. Zillow's own numbers show that 24 of the 50 largest metros in America saw home values decline in 2025. I want you to think about that. That's not a market with a few soft spots. That's a country that is splitting in half. Now, if you're in the Northeast or parts of the Midwest, Buffalo, Hartford, San Jose, San Francisco, New York, you're on the good side of this split. Prices are holding. Some of these are still deep sellers markets, and the reason is pretty straightforward. Builders can't build there. Zoning restrictions, permitting delays, land use regulations, supply is structurally constrained. You can't add inventory, so prices hold. If you own in these markets, your equity is growing. If you're trying to buy, you're still competing. But if you're in the Sun Belt, and I know a lot of you watching are, this is where we need to have an honest conversation. Let's talk about Austin, because Austin was supposed to be the future, right? The pandemic darling, tech capital of the South. Everyone was moving there. And if you bought in 2022, I'm going to be straight with you about where things stand. The average home value has dropped 6.8% in just the last 12 months, according to Zillow's own index. But from the 2022 peak, Austin is down nearly 20%. On the average home, that's a loss of roughly $117,000. Let that sit for a second. If you bought in Austin in 2022, you have lost more equity than most Americans earn in a year. And the ICE Mortgage Monitor is now showing that roughly 6,200 homeowners who bought in Austin in 2022 are underwater. They owe more than their home is worth. Inventory is 69% higher than pre-pandemic levels. There are 4 months of supply on the market. Now let's go to Southwest Florida. And honestly, this one is harder to talk about. Cape Coral, Fort Myers. The Wall Street Journal called it the worst housing market in America last year. And when you see the data, it's hard to argue. Home values are down 10% year over year. 8% of homeowners are underwater, the highest rate in the entire country. There are over 6,500 homes sitting on the market in Cape Coral alone, and there simply aren't enough buyers to absorb them. Homes are taking 67 days to sell. Sellers are accepting 4% below asking. And I want to show you one listing that I think tells the whole story of where this market is. There's a riverfront home in Cape Coral that was listed for $11.9 million in late 2023. Didn't sell. Came back at $10.9 million. Sat again. It's now asking $8.9 million. That's a $3 million haircut in under 2 years on one property. Northport, Sarasota, down 8.6%. Jacksonville, full buyer's market. Miami, the only Florida metro where Realtor.com projects any price growth at all, and even that's barely 1.1%. So when someone tells you the housing market is up 2% this year, we need you to understand what that number actually is. It's taking Buffalo's gains and Cape Coral's losses and blending them into one figure. And that figure is telling you everything is fine. It's not fine. It depends entirely on where you are. Okay, so now you see the split. Let's talk about what you actually do with this information, because the answer is different depending on your situation. If you're a homeowner in Austin, Cape Coral, Jacksonville, San Antonio, really any Sunbelt metro where inventory is climbing, here's the most important thing we can tell you. Stop looking at national headlines. They're not describing your market. Pull up your specific metro on Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com. Look at months of supply. Look at year-over-year price change. Look at how long homes are sitting. If months of supply is above 6 and trending up, you're in a buyer's market, and that means prices likely have further to fall. That's not being negative, that's just how supply and demand works. Now, if you're thinking about selling, and this is where we see people making expensive mistakes, you have to price to today's comps. Not what your neighbor got 18 months ago, not what Zillow's Zestimate said last spring. Today's comps. The data coming out of Cape Coral is crystal clear. Homes that are priced right are moving in about 60 days. Homes priced to 2022 expectations, they're sitting and taking cuts. The market right now is not rewarding optimism, it's rewarding accuracy. And if you're not planning to sell, take a breath. Equity on paper is not the same as equity in your pocket. If you bought with a fixed rate mortgage and you're staying put for the next 5 to 7 years, your monthly payment hasn't changed. The market can do whatever it wants. Where this becomes a real problem is if you need to sell, refinance, or tap that equity in the next 2 to 3 years. That's when a declining market stops being a number on a screen and starts being a personal financial situation. Now, if you're on the other side of this, you're trying to buy, listen to me carefully. You have leverage right now that you have not had in 5 years, maybe longer. In Cape Coral, sellers are taking 4% below list price. In Austin, there are 4 months of inventory and builders are practically begging you to show up. Rate buydowns, closing cost credits, free upgrades. The National Association of Realtors says 15 of the 50 largest metros are now buyers' markets. A year ago, that number was 6. Miami, New Orleans, Austin, Jacksonville, Indianapolis. The leverage has flipped. But here's the trap we see people falling into. They hear prices are falling, and they think the smart move is to wait for the absolute bottom. Nobody rings a bell at the bottom. Nobody sends you a notification that says, okay, prices have officially bottomed, come buy now. What you want isn't timing, it's value. If you're buying a home you plan to live in for 5+ years in a market that has already corrected 10 to 20% from the peak, and you're getting seller concessions on top of that, you are buying at a fundamentally different price point than someone who bought in 2022. That's the opportunity. Now, if you're in the Northeast or Midwest, totally different conversation. Buffalo, Hartford, San Jose, New York, inventory is still well below pre-pandemic levels. Sellers still have the upper hand. If you're waiting for a correction in these markets, you could be waiting a very long time. Because the problem isn't demand. It's that nobody can build fast enough. Strict zoning, high construction costs, limited land. These are structural constraints that don't resolve in a year or two. Sellers in these markets, you still have pricing power. But don't overplay it. Mortgage rates above 6% are still filtering out a lot of buyers. Your buyer pool is smaller than it was in 2021. Price it right and you'll sell quickly. Get greedy and you'll wonder why your open houses are empty. All right, now I want to come back to something I said in the beginning about why Zillow keeps landing on a positive number. Because now that you've seen what's actually happening on the ground, this part is going to hit different. Remember that zigzag? Plus 2.6 in January, negative 1.7 by April, then the reversal, 0.4, 1.2, 1.9, 1.5, 2, 7 revisions in 12 months. Here's the question. Between April and August, did the housing market fundamentally change? Did rates plunge? Did inventory dry up? Did buyers flood back in? No, none of that happened. Rates stayed above 6% all year. Inventory kept climbing. Existing home sales were stuck near 30-year lows. What happened in Zillow's rolling forecast model absorbed some seasonal buying data and a few metros where prices went sideways instead of down. The model re-optimized upward because that's what rolling models do. They chase the most recent data point. But here's the piece that changes everything. Zillow's forecast is not separate from Zillow's business. It is the business. Zillow reported $2.6 billion in revenue last year. $1.7 billion of that came from their residential segment. Agents paying for buyer leads through the Premier Agent program. Every time someone clicks Contact Agent on a Zillow listing, that's revenue. Another $199 million from Zillow Home Loans. They originated $4.7 billion in purchase mortgages, up 53%, and $630 million from rentals, up 39%. Think about what that means. Every single revenue stream depends on people buying, selling, searching, clicking. A negative forecast kills all of that. When they published minus 1.7 in April, the headline became Zillow says home prices are going to fall. Buyers hesitate. Sellers pull listings. Agents cut their ad spend. Transactions slow down. Revenue takes a hit. I'm not saying Zillow's economists are manipulating data. I want to be very clear about that. What I am saying is this. When the company that publishes the forecast is the same company that makes $1.7 billion a year from real estate transactions, a negative forecast isn't just a data point, it's a business crisis. A positive forecast isn't just a prediction, it's a press release. And the model will always find its way back to positive because the structural incentives demand it. Okay, let's close this out with a forward-looking picture. We promised you 4 signals that matter more than any forecast, and the one number from November that I think explains everything. Let's start there. First-time home buyers. This is the November number, 21%. That's it. That's the share of the market that first-time buyers represent right now, the lowest since the National Association of Realtors started tracking in 1981. 44 years of data, and first-time buyers have never been this absent. The typical first-time buyer is now 40 years old. In the 80s, it was late 20s. NAR's deputy chief economist said the share has contracted 50% since 2007. And here's why this one number explains the whole market. When first-time buyers can't get in at the bottom of the ladder, the entire chain stalls. Fewer starter home sales means fewer move-up purchases, which means fewer listings at every price point. This isn't just a first-time buyer problem. It's a velocity problem that affects every single homeowner in America. It's the reason transaction volume is stuck near 30-year lows, even though there are people who want to move. The bottom rung of the ladder is broken and everything above it slows down. All cash buyers just hit a record 26%. Repeat buyers, median age 62, are dominating with bigger down payments and no need for financing. NAR called this a tale of two cities. Equity-rich older buyers are thriving. Everyone under 40 is increasingly locked out. So when you ask who's actually driving this market, it's not young families getting their first home. It's people who already have wealth recycling it. New single-family construction starts are heading for their weakest year since 2019. And this is where the split gets worse. Builders overbuilt in the Sun Belt during the boom, and they're pulling back now. But they still can't build in the Northeast and Midwest where supply is actually needed. So the correction markets get more inventory pressure. The constrained markets stay constrained. The split widens. And here's the one that really gets me. Even in Zillow's most optimistic scenario, they're still projecting that 12 of the 50 largest metros will be declining by the end of 2026. Their own bull case, the best they think this market can do, still has nearly a quarter of major markets losing value a full year from now. When the optimistic version of the future includes ongoing decline across a quarter of the country, that's not a recovery narrative. That's a market that is repricing in real time. So whenever you see that plus 2% on Zillow, on the evening news from your agent, we want you to ask one question. Plus 2% where? Look, Zillow is not your enemy. They're a $2.6 billion company publishing a number that serves their business. We get it. But your job, whether you're a homeowner, a buyer, a seller, an investor, is to understand that the number they're giving you is a national average in a market that is no longer national. 7 revisions in 1 year, a forecast that swung from plus 2.6 to minus 1.7 and back to plus 2, and a $4 trillion housing split that one number will never capture. If this changed how you think about where the market is heading, hit subscribe. We do this every week. Data-driven, no hype, just what's actually happening on the ground. And drop a comment too. Which side of the split is your market on? We read every single one. We'll see you next time.